Hey everybody, welcome to another Our Shakespeare video. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I want to do a trailer breakdown. I saw the trailer for the movie All Is True, which is coming up in limited engagement in the United States in late December and a wide release in 2019. So I was excited about it because it is about Shakespeare. Specifically, it is about Kenneth Branagh directing Kenneth Branagh as William Shakespeare. And Kenneth Branagh is an interesting case because he's somebody who has directed and starred in several Shakespeare films, most notably and most successfully Henry V, Much Ado About Nothing, and Hamlet. And now he is playing Shakespeare himself, which on the one hand feels like a logical progression, on the other hand feels maybe a little bit egotistical and could be jumping the shark. So we'll see. But the trailer had me excited, so I would like to talk about it. And before I break down the trailer and look at it bit by bit, I'd also like to point out that I'm interested in whether or not this movie will make any waves at the Oscars for 2018. It feels like it's poised to be an Oscar-type movie based on when it's being released, limited release in late December. It feels like it's got an Oscar-caliber cast. It feels like Oscar bait in terms of subject matter, and also because it is being distributed by Sony Pictures Classics, it feels like something that's really lining up for Oscars, but I've heard no buzz about it, so maybe it's one of those things where they were hoping, but then nothing happens. Either way, I'm excited, so let's take a look at the pieces of the trailer. I'm not going to be looking at every piece of the trailer, but a lot of it. So here we go.
There is no corner of this world you have not explored. No geography of the soul which you cannot navigate.
Okay, so the first thing I want to point out here is I feel like the cinematography, at least in the shots that we see in this trailer, are really on point. Just looking at it, it looks really pretty to look at and looks nicely framed and very compelling just visually. In terms of content, this first little clip, we see Shakespeare, the character, kind of being deified by one of his contemporaries. I'm not sure who that character is who's speaking to him in this spot, but seems to be kind of holding him up as sort of like a deity of poetry and playwriting. And I'm not sure that's really accurate to how he was viewed by his contemporaries. That feels a little bit anachronistic to me. That's how we think of Shakespeare, but the way his contemporaries and the people at the time that he was writing were thinking of him, he was popular, people thought he was a good playwright, but he was not particularly more popular than the other popular playwrights of his day. So this might be a little bit of our perspective creeping into this story about 1613.
The best way to get started as a writer is to start writing.
No, really, could I just...
I don't have a favorite play. I admire all my fellow dramatists equally, and yes, I do think women should be allowed to perform the female roles, as is the practice on the continent now. Please, if you'll excuse me.
Okay, so these attitudes that Shakespeare's character, as played by Kenneth Branagh, seems to possess, these attitudes that he expresses, these may well be true of Shakespeare. We don't know for sure. One that I do want to take slight issue with, but I'm kind of splitting hairs here, is his assertion that women playing female roles is the practice on the continent. And while it's very true that in many parts of Europe, women were starting to act on the stages as women, and it was not all men throughout the continent of Europe, it was still kind of coming to be a thing and was spotty and was still a little bit controversial and kind of the new thing. So to say that women playing women is the practice on the continent is a little bit of a stretch. It would be more accurate to say, as some people are starting to do on the continent. But maybe I'm splitting hairs. Okay. Okay, so here we have this little title slide about Shakespeare retiring in the year 1613, and scholars would agree that that's pretty accurate, that Shakespeare retired to Stratford around that time. Also, he retired to Stratford in 1613, which scholars suggest is also the year that he wrote his final play, which was a co-authored play by John Fletcher, a play that we now call Henry VIII, but was actually originally titled All Is True, which, the title of the film, which makes me wonder what the connection between the play All Is True and the film All Is True will be. Will we see Shakespeare writing All Is True during the course of the film, or are we to understand that he has already written it and is now reflecting on the things that he wrote? So we shall see.
Father?
Why are you come home? No more stories left to write?
I've lived so long in imaginary worlds, I think I've lost sight of what is real.
Will, it's Sunday. You miss church here, they'll find you.
All right, in this clip, we get a little bit of a scene between Shakespeare and his daughter, Judith. Judith was actually a twin. Shakespeare had a son named Hamnet, who was Judith's twin. Hamnet died at the age of 11 in 1596. I don't know if that will factor into this film at all. Shakespeare's other child, Susanna, also would have been alive at this time. I don't see her anywhere in the trailer per se. Maybe she'll be in the film, maybe she won't. But both she and Judith would have been married and living adult lives at this time. This little clip also seems to show Shakespeare having a difficult time adjusting to life in Stratford. And one thing that it points out is with his wife telling him, if you skip church, they'll find you. And that was very true. It was illegal to skip church. Church was mandatory, and if you didn't go, they would know, and they would be coming to find you quite literally. So that's a fun little nugget of history there. And I think it's neat that this film is acknowledging that. However, I think, at least as is implied in this little clip, is that Shakespeare seems to be unaware of what life in Stratford is like. Seems to be a very much a fish out of water kind of story shaping up according to the trailer. This may not be really fully accurate. Shakespeare, according to scholars, would have visited Stratford yearly. Additionally, Shakespeare probably would have gone back to Stratford maybe for long stretches at a time in times of plague in London, and the plague hit London frequently. So Shakespeare may have spent more time in Stratford than this film, at least from the clips in the trailer, seem to imply. Okay, so this little title slide bit, these words seem to suggest that Shakespeare is working on one more story, his own. The question is, does that mean that he's writing one final play and that it will be autobiographical? Or does that simply mean Shakespeare is going to be focusing on himself and his life rather than his writings? Now, if it is that he's writing one more story and that it is semi-autobiographical, the question becomes, what story is it? Is it that he's writing the play All Is True, which maybe the title of this film suggests, or is it something else? Perhaps The Tempest, which many people suggest, many scholars suggest, is Shakespeare's final solo writing venture. But if that's the case, then scholars would take issue with the timing because The Tempest would have been written a couple of years prior. But The Tempest is considered to be semi-autobiographical, with Prospero kind of standing in for Shakespeare, and when Prospero is giving up magic, it's representative of Shakespeare giving up writing, and so it's very possible that the film is doing something with that.
Your talent has a greater scope than all the other poets, and yet you lived the smallest life.
All right, so in this clip, we see Ian Mckellen with fantastical wig hair. Ian Mckellen is an actor I would love to see anytime, anywhere. In this case, he's playing the character of Henry Wriothesley, who, according to IMDb anyway, he's playing Henry Wriothesley, who was the the person that Shakespeare's longer form poems were dedicated to. He's also rumored to be the guy who is the young man of many of the sonnets that Shakespeare wrote. It's an interesting choice here to cast Ian McKellen as Henry Wriothesley because this guy was actually 9 years younger than Shakespeare, and Ian McKellen obviously is not 9 years younger than Kenneth Branagh, and does not appear to be any younger than the character Branagh is playing in this. So if this is indeed meant to be the guy, Henry Wriothesley, that is, you know, who the poems are dedicated to, Ian McKellen is an interesting choice age-wise. Maybe it doesn't matter, but it's something that I notice.
Family is everything.
It's love, not ambition, that will blossom in this garden.
Well, something has to.
I'm not a good gardener, it's true.
Okay, can we just acknowledge how much Kenneth Branagh looks like Sir Ben Kingsley in this makeup? Yes, I think we can. Also, in this clip, we get a little bit more of Judi Dench as Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway. Unlike casting Ian McKellen in the role of Henry Wriothesley, and the age feels a little bit weird because of the age that guy would have been compared to Shakespeare in real life, here I love the fact that they've cast an older actress to play Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway, because Anne Hathaway was nearly a decade, well, more like 8 years, older than William Shakespeare. And so it definitely seems that the film is going to at least imply that age gap, if not outright state it. And I think that could be potentially very valuable to the way that the relationship develops and is portrayed in the film. Also, Judi Dench is just great in pretty much everything, so I'm thrilled with this cast.
My husband thinks you've come home to die.
I've just bought a pension. I can't die for at least 10 years or I'll be ruined.
Alas, he only lived 3 more years from 1613. Womp womp, I guess.
You went to London and became this great writer with a wife at home. You were hardly here. To us, you're a guest. Good night, husband.
Again, it seems like they're making a big deal of Shakespeare's absence from Stratford for 30 years as a major plot point, as a major character and relationship development thing between Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway. And again, I wonder if they're overplaying it, over-exaggerating it for the sake of the story of the film, and that may well be so. Also, I do want to point out that the tension between Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway in this trailer may quite well be on point, given what we know of their relationship, which, to be fair, is not a ton, but we do know that in Shakespeare's will, he did not leave Anne Hathaway very much, really, other than his second best bed. So read into that what you will.
Retirement hasn't exactly brought the peace we might have hoped for.
You must write again, Will. People need you.
All right, so this little clip, I just want to point out that this little clip seems to imply that one element of the film is going to be the question of whether or not Shakespeare will write again. So maybe he'll end up writing All Is True. Maybe he won't. Maybe this is just misdirection. But the question of will you write again Shakespeare seems to be something that's at least in the trailer, if it doesn't end up being a major factor in the film.
All these years worried about your reputation. Have you even once considered mine?
All right, in this little clip, we see Anne Hathaway talking about her reputation. Did you consider my reputation? And the question of Anne's reputation is worth considering, and it's definitely worth noting that it was for the very purpose of reputation that they were likely married. Many scholars have suggested that it was a shotgun wedding to preserve their reputation because Anne Hathaway was a couple months pregnant with Shakespeare's offspring at the time of the marriage. So there is a good chance that upholding reputation is part of this relationship from the very beginning.
And if you're honest with yourself, then whatever you write.
All right, so there's a couple things in this clip worth noting. First, we get a shot of Shakespeare writing, and we see a little bit of Shakespeare's signature on it, which looks very much like the signature from Shakespeare that we actually have. It's one of the few elements, or one of the few examples of Shakespeare's handwriting that we have, is his signature. Many scholars have noted that it's pretty messy and illegible. Another piece of Shakespeare's handwriting that we may have, but scholars seem to be suggesting that it is Shakespeare, is a little tiny snippet of the play Sir Thomas More, which is a play that's not attributed to Shakespeare, but Shakespeare may have had a hand in editing or writing some scenes for it, and we do have one scene that is written in perhaps Shakespeare's hand, but still kind of neat to see his signature, which we do know is accurate and we do know is his, turn up in the film. It's just a little piece of history there. And then also the other thing that I wanted to elevate about this little clip to highlight is that we see a shot of the city burning, or part of the city burning, and then a shot of Shakespeare in front of a wall of flames. Presumably this is the burning down of the Globe Playhouse, which happened in the year 1613. And not only that, it happened during a production of Shakespeare's play All Is True. And this makes me wonder, is the burning down of this, of the Globe, something that we're going to see early in the film as an inciting incident for getting Shakespeare to come home, for him to decide, okay, I'm done, the Globe has burned down? Or is this going to be something that happens at the end, after Shakespeare has written All Is True during his time in Stratford, and then in a climactic scene, the Globe burns down? I'm curious to see how the burning of the Globe fits into this, and how it ends up relating to the play All Is True and the title of the film, All Is True.
All is true.
And then finally there again, we hear Shakespeare say the title of the film, All Is True, and he's saying it in this trailer, not in the context of the play that he wrote called All Is True. But I'm wondering, is this something that we're going to see relating to the play that he wrote, or is the title All Is True simply thematic and a little bit of a wink and a nudge to the Shakespeare scholars who know that that's actually the title of Shakespeare's final play, Henry VIII? Who knows? I look forward to seeing it. And there we have it. Those are all of my thoughts, or at least the thoughts that I decided to share here on the trailer for All Is True. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Once it does come out, I plan to do a review of it here on this channel. So if that's something you're interested in seeing, or you like what I'm doing here, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you have thoughts on the trailer, or if you have some historical tidbits or questions that you would like addressed that I didn't necessarily address here, feel free to comment below. Fare you well. I commend you to your own content.